second day of thesis presentations of the International Master in Marine Biological Resources, IMBRSea Cohort 2021. My name is Luana Monteiro from Ghent University, Belgium. I'm also the coordinator of this wonderful and challenging master program. And first I'm going to introduce the jury of today. We might have Professor Roberto Fonseca join us soon. In the meantime, I will also act as a jury member of the presentations. In addition, I would like to introduce Professor José Rico from the University of Oviedo and Professor Lars Sterman from Sorbonne University, France. And the first speaker of today is the pleasure to introduce to you Maria Fernanda Bayo Ruiz, who is going to tell us about phytoplankton phenology in the Bay of Biscay. Maria Fernanda, you have 15 minutes to present. I will indicate to you when you have 5 minutes left and 5 to 4, or I know it might extend when there is 1 minute left.
Thank you.
The floor is yours. Yes.
Turn off the light.
Of course. Thank you. I asked Carmen to help me with this technical details. Is it good for everybody? I hope the streaming is working. Please, go ahead. Everyone has the technical.
Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction. My name is Fernanda, and today I'm going to talk to you about my thesis research, which was focused on the changes in the phenology of phytoplankton blooms in the Bay of Biscay. Okay, so let's begin by defining my unit of study, which was phytoplankton. Phytoplankton are the microscopic photosynthetic organisms which are super important to keep the health and the correct functioning of aquatic ecosystems. They are the base of the aquatic food web. They help us sequestering huge amounts of carbon. They provide us with almost half of the oxygen we breathe. I mean, they are very important. So since they have such an essential role for marine ecosystems, it is essential to learn to take a look to the bigger picture and just try to find out what their future role will be, especially in the context of climate change. Okay, so the main objectives of my research was to find changes in the start date and the magnitude in a temperate region such as the Bay of Biscay. So here, these temperate regions are characterized to have two types of blooms. One main bloom in spring and another bloom in autumn, secondary bloom. Here there is a stratification period that we see on the top. And near the start and the end of this stratification period is where we found the blooms. Okay, so the changes that we wanted to take a look was if there is an advance or a delay in the start date of the bloom, of both blooms, and if there is an increase or decrease in the magnitude of both blooms. Okay, so now about the study area. The study area was, as mentioned before, the Bay of Biscay. And what I did was I wanted to divide the Bay of Biscay into 3 different regions. And for that, I retrieved some bathymetric data from the GEFCO database of 2022. And this was the result. So we have 3 different regions: open ocean, the French continental shelf, and the Spanish continental shelf. Now let's talk about the methodology. I divided it in 3 steps. The first one is data sourcing and pre-processing, meaning how did I obtain the data. The second is characterization and analysis of phytoplankton blooms, which was like how to identify the start date and the changes in magnitude. And the third part, which was the analysis of phytoplankton bloom metrics, is like, what are these changes? Is there an increase or a decrease in the magnitude, or a delay or advance in the start date? Okay, so the first part, where did I obtain the data? It was from the Marine Copernicus online repository, and I obtained 2 data. It was daily remote sensing data with a resolution of 4 kilometers, and I obtained 2 different data sets. One, chlorophyll A concentration expressed in milligrams per cubic meter, and the other one, sea surface temperature expressed in Celsius degrees. The second step is how to identify. So I use a characterization function used by Tawada and Ladon. And to explain this, let's take a look at this graph. So this is a time series of chlorophyll A concentration at sea surface temperature for 1 year. The blue dots represent the chlorophyll A concentration. The curved red line is the sea surface temperature. And so what this function does, sorry. So it takes the lowest value of temperature and the next closer peak in chlorophyll, and that's where it sets the start date of the spring bloom. For the autumn bloom, it takes the higher value of temperature and the closest next peak in chlorophyll concentration, and that's where it sets the start date for the autumn bloom. Now the last part is analysis of phytoplankton bloom metrics. So as mentioned before, we're studying star date and magnitude. So for the star date, it is expressed in natural days after January 1st. And again, for the whole period, which is 24 years, we analyze it using a linear regression. And then for magnitude, expressed in milligrams per cubic meter, we use the exponential regression to analyze it. Okay, so here we have the results of our linear regression, but don't be scared. Let's just focus on this part, which is the effect in days after January 1st. In the numbers in red with the minus sign express an earlier onset, and the numbers in green express a delay in the onset of the bloom. Now let's take a closer look. So what's happening here? So for spring, we found that for every region, we found an earlier start date of the bloom. So for France, it is starting 25 days earlier. For Spanish region, 20 days earlier, and for the open waters, 11 days earlier. Now, what is happening with autumn? There is a delay in the start date in the French region of 25 days. In the Spanish region, it is starting 5 days earlier, and for autumn, it is starting 7 days later. Now, here we have some maps. I really hope they can show the difference. There is a clear division. This is autumn, and this is spring, and this is the first year of our study period, and this is the last year. And so the darker the color means the later in the year. So we can see that the bay is getting darker here on autumn, meaning that there is a delay in the start date. And for the spring, the bay is getting lighter, right? Meaning that the day is getting starting earlier. Okay, now for bloom magnitude, these are our results of the exponential regression. Again, let's just focus on this, which is the change in magnitude expressed in percentage for the whole period, the 24 years. They are all in green because they all show an increase. We are seeing an increase in magnitude in the whole Bay of Biscay. Okay, so for spring, we see that there is a strong increase in magnitude on the French continental shelf that we can also see here in the maps. For the Spanish area, it is almost 9% increase in magnitude, and for the open waters, it is 16%. Okay, now for autumn, there is an increase of 3% on the French region, 5% in the region of Spain, and for open waters, around 27%. So here in the maps, I think this is quite dramatic. Like the lighter the color, the higher the increase. So you can see that it's kind of on fire, right? Like this, the bay is really going light. This is the spring bloom, and this is the autumn bloom. I have some maps that may show this better. So here we have the spring bloom magnitude, and we can see that even there are like some days where like, take a look at this. Like the magnitude is increasing considerably in the French continental shelf. And we can see that through time, these are the 24 years, and the bay is getting lighter. It is the same case for autumn. The bay is getting lighter, but it's not as intense, as dramatic as with the spring bloom. Okay, so what we found was the start date. There is an earlier occurrence of the spring blooms and a delay in autumn blooms during the 24 years of study. Here we have some start date trend maps where we can see like the red again is days later in the year, and the blue earlier in the year. So we can see there is a clear difference between spring and autumn bloom. This earlier occurrence could be due to many factors. Some of them could be a decrease in the mixing layer depth in winter, an increase of sea surface temperature, an increase of thermal stratification. Do you remember that we were talking about this stratification period at the beginning? But there can be several factors that might be affecting this. Now, for the magnitude, we found a consistent increase throughout the Bay of Biscay for both blooms. And again, this could be due to the input of rivers and estuaries that are near, like here in the coast of France. We have a big estuary here and some rivers here. Could be due to a warming effect, climate change, and some upwelling events. So here in this map, we can see that the red color means an increase in magnitude, and blue color a decrease. So we see that the coast of France, like the coast of France is showing high magnitude values, and then for autumn, it is like no change, almost like it's like the opposite color, right? Or like a very little increment in some areas. Okay, so the conclusions. Plankton phenology has changed in the last 2 decades in the Bay of Biscay. Spring bloom has advanced 14 days in the whole bay on average, while autumn bloom has been delayed 10 days. There is a contrast between the continental shelves and the open ocean waters that show that spring blooms have a more pronounced earlier onset in coastal areas than in open waters. Bloom magnitude shows a higher increase in spring blooms in French and Spanish continental shelf than in autumn in open waters. Okay, some of the future directions for phenology studies would be to make a further research on potential phytoplankton bloom triggers in the bay. Also to perform a more complex analysis by including more physical and biogeochemical variables. Yes, of course, future studies should emphasize the implications of changes in bloom phenology in the bay. I would like to thank my supervisor, Dr. Fernando González Tawada, and my promoter, Professor José Luis Acuña, an IMBRSea program, an IMBRSea coordination, Erasmus Mundus program for making this possible, and Marine Copernicus monitoring system.
Thank you very much, Fernando. It was nicely on time, which gives us time to a nice discussion. To start, I'd like to invite Professor José to make questions of the discussion.
That was very interesting, and it's a meso-scale analysis of what is going on in the Bay of Biscay. One question regarding the methodology. You actually you calculate the onset of the blooms based on temperature, right?
Yeah.
So depending whether the peak of temperature has occurred, you decide whether the bloom has started or not.
That and chlorophyll concentration.
Both.
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what is the trend? Do you think that the trend in temperature or changes in temperature within the Bay of Biscay play a major role in this earlier state and later finish of the autumn bloom? Because now we have a longer period in between the blooms.
Yes, yes. I would say so. Like definitely, it's playing. That's one of the analyses that would be super interesting to have, just to analyze how the temperature is increasing and if there is a correlation between that and the increase of magnitude and the changes in the start date of the bloom. Yeah, for sure.
And is it increasing, the temperature is increasing homogeneously, or is it increasing more in summer, more in autumn, more in winter? Have you seen any trend that could explain this shift in the onset of the blooms?
Yeah, it's kind of homogeneous the temperature in the whole bay. I guess because it's kind of like an enclosed system.
Mm.
Um, Perhaps where you can find a little bit more variability would be in the coast of Spain, because you have the influence of the Canary Current and other currents. But yeah, overall it's very homogeneous.
Okay, thank you.
No.
Yes, thank you for this presentation, and indeed the change are really dramatic. I would say one change is, in accordance with what we think, is change the phenology of the heating, the mixed layer, it's less mixed sooner in spring, so that's why you have the date of the start is shifted toward the beginning of the year. But the other case, which is increasing in amplitude, is really strange. So phytoplankton is limited by temperature, nutrients, and light, but among them, temperature is not the main factor. So in the two other factors, which one do you think play a role? Because if you have 2 times more phytoplankton, it means that you have 2 times more nitrate. Otherwise, you don't have 2 times more phytoplankton. So can you speculate about?
Sorry, could you repeat the question, the last part of the question?
If you have 2 times more phytoplankton in biomass,
yeah,
it means that you have 2 times more nitrate in the water.
Yeah.
Nitrate, iron, phosphate.
Yeah.
Can you say something? Because even if you have more light and if it's warm,
yeah, it's not
if you
enough.
don't have the nutrients, you don't have phytoplankton.
Yeah. Well, we can see that in the coast of France, uh, which is the part where it is increasing the most, and that's because we have the input of nutrients there.
Okay. So
Yeah.
do you have data that shows that there is a...
I don't have data. Yeah, I didn't analyze nutrients. Yeah, but that is like actually in the future direction. That would be super interesting to include nutrients, wind speed, eddies, like other factors that might be, because it might be too simplistic to say that just because the input of nutrients, that is what is making this huge increase in the cost of.
Why is it too simplistic?
Because there are many elements taking place in the ocean, like in the aquatic environment.
Such as what is the most important limiting factor for the growth of phytoplankton?
Like we have nutrients, we have light.
The nutrients.
Yeah.
Like did light change? Do we have more sun now than before?
But I don't know if, for example, if we have like the influence of kind of superficial currents that might be like diluting the nutrients that enter here. I have no idea.
Well, I think, you're right to say that the perspective is to really look at the nutrients. Having such an increase,
Yes.
it means 2 times more nutrients there.
Yeah.
Which I don't know how you can obtain it.
Yeah.
Then, that was the first question. Second question is, why did you decide to divide your special area into 3 very good, situation based on, I do not really understand based on which criteria.
It was just like a conversation with my supervisor, because we thought that, I mean, there are different marine currents taking place. Let me go back. There are different currents. Here. Different currents taking place. Like they enter the ocean and they make like a loop, and then we have this superficial current here, and this is kind of this current goes here and kind of divide.
Okay, so it's an expert decision. It's not based on any clustering, because you could use your data,
yeah,
as a way to cluster the different pixels of this map and look at which pixels covering with each pixels.
Yes.
There are some other techniques which can be better to see spatial variability, because here we are using a lot of spatial variability.
Yeah.
And when you show us all your maps, maybe you can go to some of the maps.
Yeah. Which map?
Yeah, but the one which you have here.
This one?
Yeah, for example, that one. We can see, of course, the land ocean gradient, but sometimes in the ocean we see groups, and we see that the phytoplankton does not necessarily follow the expert's percentage that you made. So, yeah, I would propose that in the future also try to find a method to spatially analyze the time series.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's really very interesting. Thank you very much.
Did you try to look at the correlation between this and some broad climatic indices, such as North Atlantic oscillation?
No, this was just like an exploratory analysis,
Okay.
just to try to have an idea of what is happening there, and to invite like more deeper research, with more complex analysis.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Lars. I also need to pose you some questions because I'm also the agenda. I'll continue on the line of the discussion. Could you maybe show your first discussion slide?
Yeah.
Could you? This was already a little bit mentioned, but I'm also missing. I have the feeling that it's more speculative, and I would like to know if you could elaborate a bit more on these three highlight points that you are discussing that would justify your findings.
Yeah, well, yeah, these are just like some things that might be causing this, that might be affecting this, but it's not determinant. Like, for example, the increase in sea surface temperature. Yeah, the temperature in the Bay of Biscay has increased like half degree, like in the study period. But that could be making that the stratification period that we mentioned earlier might be getting like longer. So phytoplankton has like more chance to grow. Yeah, for example, that the decrease in the mixing layer depth. This happens in winter. So let's go back to. Sorry. So here. So with the deep mixing of the layers, so the phytoplankton sinks because it doesn't have like the lighter, and that could mean like, oh, sorry, I'm getting confused. Yeah, I don't understand exactly what is happening, like what might be causing this because um, there are several factors to take into account. But what is clear is that the dates are spreading, so that could mean that this stratification period is also getting bigger. But yeah, I I don't have like a perfect cause for this.
And let's say the main conclusion that you reach from your data that there is an early bloom and also a delay. But this continues to be, that this gets confirmed and continues as such for another 10, 20 years or even getting worse if your assumptions are correct in relation to climate change. What have you got thoughts of what would be the consequence for the environment and the importance of phytoplankton or the potential harmful effects of it? What would happen in the environment, which changes would happen in other compartments because of this?
Well, if the trend continues, the thing is that the Bay of Biscay is very near like a subtropical limit. So if the trend continues, we might end up with one bloom, like that is more intense instead of having two blooms. This might be a little bit like risky to say, but that would be the case if the trend continues.
And what would be the consequences of this?
Well, mismatch in the trophic levels, so that could affect the fisheries and the ecosystem as a whole.
But how? Are you able to give us an example?
Yeah. So, like, if we have, for example, if there is like so we have the fish and we have the larva, and when they hatch, they are looking to feed. And if they don't find their food because the bloom started earlier or started later, then this could have consequences, like they wouldn't find food, and so they would die, and this would affect the fisheries. Yeah, that could be one consequence with the change in the start date.
And what if there is too much food available?
If there is too much food available?
No, what if for the species, if you have a big one,
like a big
bloom, as
magnitude?
you're suggesting, what would be the consequences of that?
Well, assuming there are not like harmful algal blooms, then I mean this could have consequences for tourism, for example. Yeah. What other consequence? You could have like a quicker depletion of oxygen, like because of larger blooms. Yeah, I don't know, like maybe could lead to more like anoxic zones. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. We still have time for one quick or one good question. Yes.
So I think you have very interesting data. I see some interesting spatial patterns that are actually, I think there is a lot in there. But I want to ask something about the trends. You define some trends with linear regression. And I was wondering about significance because you have a large variability. And how significant are these long-term trends?
Yeah, that's true. You're talking about this?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, because of the nature of the data, they have a lot of noise, and that will need maybe more time. But yeah, like they didn't really show like a high significance. But I spoke about this with my supervisor, and yeah, just because of the nature of the data.
Yeah, I think so. It's an exploratory indication.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Fernanda.
Thank you.
thank you for the introduction, Luana. Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming here at 9 a.m. to listen to us. I welcome you to my presentation, master's thesis presentation titled A Preliminary Ocean Literacy Study on Atlantic Microbiomes in South African Schools. This study was conducted at a zoological station in Napoli, Italy, under the supervision of Daniel Udicon, Marcello Vici, and Leland Dev. To break down the title of my thesis for better understanding, ocean literacy is defined as ocean's influence on you and your influence on the ocean. An ocean literate person is someone who would understand the ocean science concept and is able to communicate to his or her audience effectively. This thesis is a part of a project where Atlantico, along with the UNESCO, is preparing a series of documents and toolkits for the literacy in the society. Atlantico stands for Atlantic Ecosystem Assessment, Forecasting and Sustainability. It is a European project under All Atlantic Ocean Research and Innovation Project. It aims to determine structure and function of Atlantic Ocean microbiome to design knowledge-based resources. One of the objectives of the project is to build capacity and transfer knowledge. Hence, this thesis is an attempt towards transferring knowledge. Further, this project is a collaborative project between Europe, South America, and South Africa. Hence, our case study is South Africa. The main idea behind the project is to introduce the topic of microbiomes in school curriculum. The reason we want to do this is because children are very good at absorbing knowledge and communicate it. During the COVID-19 pandemic, it was observed the children used science concept, were communicating their science concept by applying microbiology knowledge to guide their friends and family to understand the COVID-19 situation. A study by Timmis and Jibuk highlighted that children are key facilitators in creating literacy in the society. Hence, we wanted to contribute towards creating ocean engaged citizens, and in order to do so we wanted to know the current level of marine science knowledge and ocean literacy in South Africa. Hence, the main principle of the study was to determine and outline the gaps in the existing materials and knowledge of ocean literacy in South African school, emphasizing aspects of microbiome which are central to the project. What are ocean microbiomes? Ocean microbiomes are microbial communities that are evolving in a well-defined habitat. The reason we want to highlight ocean microbiomes is because during COVID-19, many people were aware of the microbes and their role in the environment. However, people usually associate microbes with diseases, spoiled food, which kind of put microbes in a negative spotlight. And when it comes to ocean, people again are very interested in the marine lives, and they aren't much aware of the roles of microbes in the ocean functioning. Hence, we want to highlight the importance of microbiomes. These are the main objectives of our project, but I would like to concentrate on this ocean literacy toolkit because the end goal of the project is to develop and promote an all-inclusive toolkit on the cultural values and views and values of the ocean in the South African context. There were 3 steps for our methodology, which involved bibliographic research followed by the interviews with the educators, and the third step was to do an online survey for the school teachers. As I mentioned earlier, the study was conducted at Stazione Zoologica in Napoli, and the work was remote work. For bibliographic research, we reviewed papers for South African ocean culture, current level of ocean literacy in South Africa, and the existing marine science materials. Based on the information that we obtained from the literature review, we prepared a set of questions for the interviews, which were 2 volunteer interviews, and we interviewed the former educators Russell Stevens and Xavier Zilstra. They are both former educator at Two Oceans Aquarium in Cape Town. Again, the information that we obtained through the interviews and the literature review, we designed a survey for the teachers. This survey was designed to gauge the level of knowledge on microbiomes, the density of marine science curriculum content, teachers' enthusiasm towards microbiomes, and their opinion on whether an additional topic in the curriculum would condense the curriculum and increase the complexity of the subject. The survey was shared via email. There were 20 questions in total and took about 15 minutes to finish it. The first part of the survey had biogeographical questions, and the second part contained short answer question and 3 open-ended questions. Results. From the results of bibliographic research, we found out that South Africa recently launched a new marine science curriculum for grades 10 to 12, indicating that South Africa has recognized the importance of having marine science in their curriculum. The curriculum was approved in 2019 and implemented in 2020. The reason behind creating this curriculum was to bridge the knowledge gap between universities and school. It was designed with the experts of many scientific researchers and education officers from the Education Department of South Africa. And Russell's and Xavier's were part of this team, and they contributed in designing this curriculum. However, due to COVID-19, it was offered as as an online course by the Two Oceans Aquarium. There are 4 components of the curriculum: marine biology, ocean ecology, human and ocean, and oceanography. There are total of 85 topics with the range of these components. Having gone through this curriculum during the literature review, it was observed that there is no mention of ocean microbiome in the curriculum. During our literature review, it came up that Two Oceans Aquarium plays an integral role in the formal and informal education sectors in South Africa. Their education department offers various marine biology and biology courses for the students. They organize a lot of beach camps and uh, aquarium tours for the schools and students. There is also a network of teachers and the educators at the Two Oceans Aquarium, where they often share the resources to support teachers to create lesson plans. From the interviews, we found out that the curriculum was first implemented in 3 pilot schools in 2020. At the moment, there are 12 schools across South Africa who have implemented this curriculum, and there are 10 schools who are located in the Western Cape, 1 school in the Northern Cape, and the other one in Eastern Cape. South Africa has 11 official languages, yet the curriculum was published in English language because English is a preferred language at university levels. In this graph, you can see that the graph represents the increase in the number of students opting for marine science. In 2021, there were 12 students. In 2022, the number increased to 62 students, and this year there are 114 students, indicating that students are motivated to opt for this subject as their major. So the initial idea for the survey was to get a list of all the 12 schools that have implemented this curriculum, get in touch with them, send the survey to all the teachers involved. However, due to unseen circumstances and unaccounted circumstances, we could only send the survey to a handful of teachers, and out of the handful of teachers, we received only 4 responses. All the teachers belong to the schools that are located in the Western Cape, and the 3 schools were located closer to the shore, and 1 was an inland school. Most of the teachers taught the grades 10 to 12. The major findings from the short answered questions and the open-ended question was that the curriculum is very content rich and easier to adapt. However, they felt that there were some rooms of improvement. All the respondents indicated that an addition of microbiome to the curriculum would condense the curriculum, and that it can be included as an introductory topic or could be integrated with the section on open ocean, which talks about open ocean food chains and the importance of microbiomes in the food chain, and ocean acidification. Uh, all the respondents also mentioned the use of additional resources such as YouTube videos, uh, documentaries, and PhET simulation for the creation of lessons plan, and as they are helpful in better understanding of topics for learners. They also mentioned that group activity, excursions, and camp are the effective methods for students' understanding, and they usually have a lot of collaboration with the local universities and the Two Oceans Aquarium to come up with the activities. Further discussion. From the literature review, it was evident that there is a lack of literature in South Africa in the context of ocean literacy, but there are many local and formal and informal ocean literacy initiatives, but there is not much that can give literature available. Further, the socio-economic conditions of the school limits the availability and the accessibility of the resources, hence there is limited integration of those in creating their lesson plans. The respondents also indicated that they didn't have professional training in teaching marine science, as ocean literacy practice or marine science training is absent from the regular teacher training. Further, it was discussed that the tools available with Atlant Eco will be provided to support teachers in creating their lesson plans and for the integration of more resources. These are some of the tools that are available with Atlant Eco. I'm not getting into the working and the technicalities, but Foldscope is a digital paper microscope which is small and compact, can be carried in the field. The idea behind it is that you can attach it to your phone to view your samples on the phone screen. Similarly, Curiosity microscope is also something that you can attach to your phone to view your samples, except the structure is a bit different. And Planktoscope is a modular open source hardware and online software where you can view a quantitative imaging of the planktons. So this is a kit which you can assemble together and then you connect it to the online software to view your plankton samples. In conclusion, the South Africa, when it comes to applying ocean literacy in South Africa, it needs a different approach because South Africa has the lowest literacy rates in the world, and that is something it needs to be considered. In addition to that, there are consequences of having unequal education policy from the apartheid years that are still present. That again, the differences in the socio-economic hierarchy is also something that needs to be taken into account, because there are many people in South Africa, especially from the inland area, that have never been to the ocean or seen the ocean. And it also and these challenges impact both students and teachers depending on the accessibility and the availability of the resources. Since our study didn't have enough data and no statistic analysis could be conducted, it is recommended that more research studies inclusive of large population sample size is required. As mentioned before, that there are 12 schools across South Africa who have implemented this curriculum, but there needs to be a formalized ocean literacy to embed the marine science in regular curriculum so all the schools across South Africa can adapt it. In the end, the idea is to shed positive light on the importance and function of microbiomes in marine environment to create ocean engaging citizens and microbe literacy in the society. Thank you. These are my references. I thank my supervisor and everyone for coming here. I'm done.
Thank you, Dr. for this nice presentation on ocean literacy session. This is focused on ocean microbiomes. I'd like to invert the order and start my professor Bennett to start.
Yes.
Questions?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Germaine, because you had slides which were really clear and well done, and that made the flow of the presentation very straight. It's an unusual presentation because it looks like there's not so much data, but it's a more meta-analysis of a context and also on one activity, but you did not receive so many
Responses.
I just understood this survey so you designed the survey with two former teacher in South Africa.
Yes.
So that's because you are new in the you are not from South Africa.
No.
So you don't know the system there.
No.
So they brought you their expertise in the system. You designed this survey. And why did you, let's say, only try to target the teachers? Why didn't you also target maybe the children?
Yeah, so for the bigger picture, the idea was to take both from teachers' perspective and from the students' perspective. But again, it was very difficult to try to get in touch with people and to get to them response since everything was done online and I couldn't go to South Africa due to visa issues and everything. So we had to just do the survey just for teachers because like it would have been very difficult to be able to get to students to do the survey online.
Okay.
But that's like, I mean, doing the survey with the students is the next step for us.
Okay. And how would you design a survey for the children? What would you like to evaluate with such a survey?
To see if they know of microbes and if that is something that they are interested in because the curriculum is for grade 10 to 12 students, so there are other subjects like life sciences where there are few aspects of organism that are mentioned in that subject, so they have a little bit of idea about it. So we just want to see if they have a prior knowledge to the microbiomes and if that is something they would like to know more about.
Ocean Literacy is a debate program which is supposed to last 4 years at least. So one of the goals, as you said, of Ocean Literacy is to make people aware of, to educate them about the ocean, then to make them understand that if they change their behavior, there might be a change in their environment. How long it will take to really have a society and change in the behavior of the society? Is it one generation? Why are we starting here at the children level? Do you think we should start at other level in society? How would you proceed?
You mean like start with the lower grades? Or
Maybe, maybe, I mean, general public, then decision makers, and do you think when you do ocean literacy, how would you deliver the same message, or do you have a message which should be tailored to?
so the idea behind targeting students and to do it to like implement this in the curriculum is to not just to influence them to take up marine science as their career, but for them to be aware enough so that whatever career they take up, they make conscious decision, keeping in mind that yes, this might affect ocean in some ways. So yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah, then about those toolkits that you showed, were they used in those class, or that's the point I did not follow.
The toolkit.
The practoscope, the curiosity.
No, those are the tools that will be later on provided with the Ocean Literacy Toolkit on completion. So, but these are the tools that are available with Atlant Eco projects, and they want to use these so to create plan to provide it to teachers as well.
Okay. Why South Africa? Why only targeting South Africa? Is it because Atlantico only focused on South Africa, or
I'm sorry, I didn't.
why did you choose South Africa?
Because South Africa is a very vast country with diverse communities, and it has a lot of social layers, uh, and yeah, and also because it's there's different approach that needs to be taken with South Africa as compared to the European countries, and also it's because of the part of the project.
And
Yes.
there are other efforts of interest in other countries of Africa's continent? Have you tried to review?
No.
I think it would be interesting to see what's being done in South Africa as opposed to in other countries. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Max.
Yeah, thank you. It was a very clear presentation. This is such a novel subject that is like going into an explored territory. So I guess there are a lot of questions. One to start. What is the age of the students in grades 10 to 12?
Uh, Good. I have no idea because I would say from 13 to 17 maybe.
Yeah, okay, because digging into the question that Lars was making, I mean, um, the main objective was to develop a strategy or a method for inserting information about the ocean microbiome into the curriculum. And isn't that a very ambitious starting point? Because maybe you should start just by pure ocean basic literacy. I'm wondering if you ask about ocean literacy here in Asturias or anywhere in Spain, if you ask about just ocean literacy, the level of knowledge is going to be really low. That's my bet. And then if you go and try to promote ocean microbiomes, the first thing that they are going to say, what is a microbiome? They have no the slightest idea. So it's like if you want to promote knowledge in cooking, and in basic cooking, and the first thing that you do is let's do filet mignon with blah 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 and develop this technique. They will say, no, first teach me how to use the pan, how to fry an egg, and so why do you choose this approach, the ocean microbiome, instead of basic ocean literacy?
That's a good question. Well, I guess there are other subjects as well who are where the ocean concepts can be intricated, and I believe the subjects like normal biology and the life sciences, they have some topics about ocean and environment, so the basic knowledge can come from that, I believe, and and there are some topics in the school curriculum where the topics talk about the plankton communities, so it's not like they do not have any idea about the microbes that are available in ocean. So I think taking that into account and trying to somehow connect that to ocean microbiomes would create a link.
Really, I'm really impressed that the students age 13, 14 in South Africa have a basic knowledge in ocean science, because I wonder if the students in Spain age 12 to 14 have any basic knowledge in ocean science, which I really doubt, actually.
Well, I believe like more research is required to again to see the knowledge that the current students have, and then maybe try to design the topic and to integrate it into the curriculum
Okay.
based on whatever information we obtain.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nico. And if I understood correctly, your master thesis is tackling something that is part of the Atlantic project. Could you give us some more information about what is the Atlantic and what is the current status of the program, and how your results are supposed to further, besides what you already mentioned in the end of the presentation?
Well, it's Atlantico is a project where like a lot of marine experts come together to talk more about to do marine science research on microbiomes. Uh, but and there are under the microbiome pillar of the Atlantico, there are a lot of researchers in collaboration with scientific institutions. But yeah, I do not have the current status of that.
Okay, and wait, there's my thing. Maybe I missed it, but how many teachers in total were interviewed?
Um, we interviewed only two people, Russells and Xavier's, because they were the main people who were part of the team who contributed in writing the curriculum, and they were also the source for ours to give the contacts of the teachers because they were involved in implementing the curriculum in all the schools. But yeah, we just interviewed 2 people, and the survey response were from 4 teachers.
Okay, so there is a survey of 4 teachers based on interviews that help you to design the questionnaire. Is that, and then you interview how many teenagers, because I think it would have been nicer for the audience if you had specified the children, because I was thinking children in younger age. And then I was puzzled when you were mentioning about choosing a major.
Yeah.
I don't think choosing a major.
No, but I meant the grade 10 to 12 students, yeah.
And how many in total? Again, maybe I missed it, but how many teenagers responded to the questionnaire?
No, so we only did the survey with the teachers because it was already very difficult to get the response from them.
Yeah,
we never got the opportunity to put out the survey for the students.
And how do you think this? What is your impression of the data set you could generate? Do you think this was enough, or
No,
would you
no.
do it different?
Yes.
What do you think would help to make it more robust to your analysis?
Well, I think going to South Africa would have been much better because I would have not just interviewed 2 people but a range of people who were connected to the curriculum, and getting in touch with the teachers, and having a discussion before putting out the survey out to them would have been much greater way to go about this.
Do you have any methodology? Did you search what would be a minimum sound number of subjects to interview for a good analysis in this kind of research?
It was depending on the number of people who would respond and would be available to talk with us. But again, we never got that opportunity.
Okay, I want to give the opportunity to the audience to pose questions. Do we have questions from the audience? Yes,
I'll ask just a question out of curiosity. The curiosity that I know is bigger, so I'm wondering how much does this cost and how's the resolution? Does somebody know that?
For the tools?
The curiosity microscope.
It said €100 or something. Yeah,
and do you know the resolution? Like, have you seen?
No.
I invite you to take a picture. To allow us to go to the website.
It's available on Manu Prakash's lab's website.
Do you have any further questions, Cooper?
So, to me as a European, it sounds weird that the European consortium, I think, or is it global, is like studying and implementing something in South Africa. So I hope there is some good collaboration with South Africans. And also I think it's a really hard choice because South Africa is enormously complex, as you mentioned. And I was wondering, the schools that you surveyed, what is their socio-economic status? What schools are they? Because South Africa is one big melting pot.
So while doing the literature review, it was seen that the schools which are in Cape Town or in the Western Cape have a lot of resources and accessibility, while the other schools which are more inland and in the Western or the Northern Cape do not have that many accessibility, and there are many more disadvantaged communities in those areas as well. So there's if we had the opportunity, I think we would have seen stark difference because Western Cape is there are a lot of opportunities and.
Very ambitious. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sure.
give me a second, please. I just asked my colleague for the pointer, even though I'm not going to be able to use this for this. Oh, fair. I can also use this.
That's nice. Okay.
Just a second, sorry.
I will introduce your skills. Then we keep it on time. It's my pleasure to introduce the third speaker of this session, Bernardo Leal, who's going to tell us about citizen perception of the marine ecosystem services, a remote archipelago as case study. Bernardo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the introduction. Now how much time I have? Welcome everyone, and thank you all for being here. As Leon said, I'm going to talk about citizen perception over marine ecosystem services and using a remote archipelago as a case study. Important to note is that it's not I have not submitted my thesis yet, so it's officially not completed work yet. And to start with, I just want to talk a bit about the role of social perception that has been increasingly recognized for its importance for sustainable and successful management plans. Why? Because it allows us to take into account local preferences and priorities, minimizing conflicts and promoting public support of conservation measures. And in conjunction with the ecosystem services approach, it allows us to see how people perceive the benefits given to society by nature, in this case more specifically the ocean, foster discussion between stakeholders, experts and policymakers, speeding up action towards a sustainable future. Unfortunately, the ecosystem service approach is still lacking a lot in the social dimension, especially in the marine environment and island systems, which themselves rely heavily on ecosystem services. And unfortunately, our study site, Madeira, is not an exception, with this study being the first broad research over the topic. So, where is it located? It's an autonomous region of Portugal, located in the northeast Atlantic, about 900 kilometers out of the southwest of the mainland of Portugal. It is highly related with the ocean, with 10% of its GDP being connected with the blue economy, and as many island destinations, it relies heavily on tourism, which itself relies heavily on ecosystem services. It is also known for its iconic marine life, namely Monk's Hill and Xenos Petrel, and it has 8 areas of special protection, namely the biggest full protection MPA in Europe, the MPA of Selvagens. Finally, as most coastal zones, there's an ongoing problem with threats, as coastal development, runoff from the rivers, invasive species, obviously what we all know. So, going to objectives, first we wanted to evaluate perceptions of the marine ecosystem services, assess awareness of threats to the marine environment, and see which factors might be affecting this perception. Finally, identify marine species that arouse stakeholders' interest. But how did we do this? We designed a survey separated in 3 parts. A first one that assessed people's past interactions with the ocean and emotional connection, given its importance to perception. Secondly, the main part, so the perception of ecosystem services and threats. And finally, a third section that assessed the species of interest and stakeholder-specific questions. So for this survey, we had closed and open questions and 4-point Likert scales. For the ecosystem services, we based this table with a 4-point Likert scale on the work of Marine Establish, which is one of the projects we are supporting, since they are also starting to assess the ecosystem services situation in Madeira. So, which stakeholders did we target? We wanted different usages of the marine environment. So, from a recreational standpoint, we had recreational fisheries. From the business sector, we had bird watching, so marine bird watching, and scuba diving companies, and finally schools, represented by its students, given their importance towards a sustainable future. All of these surveys were done by myself physically, face-to-face. Initially, we wanted to go with online surveys with recreational fisheries, but due to a series of limitations and problems, it was a bit of a fiasco. So we ended up, we only had 9 answers to the online survey, and we added a bit more face-to-face. For the data analysis, given its first exploratory approach, it was mainly descriptive analysis to summarize results and see trends, and chi-square tests to see if there was any significant correlation between any factors or variables and the perception of ecosystem services and threats. So we ended up having 269 answers to the survey. We had 22 fishes, which was the most problematic, 13 out of the 14 scuba diving centers, and 1 out of 3 active birdwatching companies. There were supposed to be more, but due to COVID, again, a problem they are not anymore, and 233 students from different parts of Madeira. So first, we started with ocean imagery as a first approach to people-space interactions, given it's a good way to see the first perception. So we asked what were the first words that people associate with the ocean. Despite being here marine, it's because people said marine life, marine threats, marine a lot. But actually fish was the most common for recreational fisheries and students, with 17% and approximately 15%, and businesses had life as the most common word. But we wanted to go a bit more into detail, so based on the work of Engel and colleagues from 2021, we categorized the words under psychological impression, place identity, utilitarian, environmentalist, and naturalist. I'm sorry again, the ones we could not, we put under other. We can see that for the case of recreational fisheries, the most common was psychological impression, with words like positive affection, so peaceful, tranquility, beautiful, and words of visual impression, as for example, the ocean being big. So it's a recreational activity, it's expected that we would have this. As for the business sector, we had utilitarian naturalists. Since we had mostly diving, here in words of recreation, we had words related to diving, so related to their work, and naturalists englobed words related to different species or life. For students, we had mostly place identity, so words like waves, rocks, sand. But what shocked us most was that there was the lowest words of recreation for this stakeholder group. We also wanted to target emotion, since ocean literacy has identified this as one of the main factors influencing people's behavior towards the ocean. And we saw that the most positive found one was joy, with a very high percentage for all, and the most common negative one was fear, with a still interesting fifth of the surveyed people showing fear towards the ocean. But what I want to focus on is this, the predominance of positive emotions, that was very high for all stakeholders. We did not also only want to understand this, but also if people were having positive actions towards nature and towards protecting nature. So we asked for participation in activities that promote good practices towards nature. And fortunately, we had a high percentage, a bit, well, obviously bigger from the businesses, because they help in educational programs, research, and others. But for all of them, the most common word was litter collection. This comes to make sense aligned with our next findings of the major question. So just to give you a better understand, this showcases the median answer of importance given to these ecosystem services, from not important at all, slightly, very, and extremely important. We could see that biodiversity conservation was the biggest one, the biggest importance perceived, and the lowest was spiritual significance, likely due to the fact that in Portugal there's not the relationship as, for example, in the Polynesian culture, in which you have the water as a source of life, mythological impact. In Portugal, it's more related to the discoveries, exploration, recreation. We could also see that the only one in which there was a correlation between stakeholder group and perception of importance was for charismatic landscapes, which comes aligned with the percentages we had of the words of psychological impact. So visual impact and positive affection was bigger for recreational fishers, businesses, and then students. Here we can see the separation by percentage of each of the options overall. And passing to the threats, we are the biggest being sewage water, probably due to the impact of media showing cases of floating feces in the beach sometimes. The lowest being invasive species, which is a bit shocking since there are actually some interesting invasive species cases, especially one now that is probably going to affect it a lot. So this might change actually in the near future. We can also see that in this case there was more than half of the threats that had a significant correlation between stakeholder group and perception. But we were glad to see that there was a trend of high importance given to both ecosystem services and threats. Talking about factors that influenced this perception, the most predominant one was for both cases, threats and ecosystem services, the predominance of positive emotions, which again comes in aligned with the studies of ocean literacy over this factor that has a lot of impact in how people perceive and interact with the ocean. Passing to the third section, we have the taxa of interest. We have to be a bit more specific. So for fishermen, we had species fished in bigger numbers and favorite species to fish in order to try to assess what were the main species targeted by this group. And for both cases, we actually had Symposium macratense, the parrotfish of Madeira, actually a funny guy. And this is interesting because literature shows that he's suffering high fishing pressure. So obviously we need to keep an eye on it and see how the populations evolve. Passing to the businesses, we had the dusky grouper and the monk seal. Here we had a species creating more interest and species creating more excitement in clients. So this was the perception of the business sector. Here we did not include the birds because there was only one answer. So the dusky grouper is the ex-libris of diving in Madeira, so it's understandable that people are expecting to see it. And the monk seal is one of the rarest seal species in the world, with a very small population here, so its rarity and its big size might explain the excitement. Finally, students, we didn't have very specific answers, so we had to categorize under bigger taxonomical hierarchy groups, and we saw that cetaceans were the most common. This might be due to the fact that there's a past with whale hunting, nowadays a lot of whale watching, and sometimes even activities with schools in which some schools take their students every year on a whale watching thing, which I would hope I had when I was a kid, but I did not. Monk seals were, however, the most mentioned species, which suggests a very good impact from the Institute of Forests and Conservation of Nature, because they work every year to create awareness about these species. Finally, targeting stakeholders. Yeah, I'm way ahead. Well, okay. Stakeholder-specific questions. We have some interesting ones, but I'll focus mostly on this one because this was the most shocking one. So we asked if they could name their three favorite marine species of Madeira, and 22.7 could not name a single one. We also asked if students could name three marine protected areas of Madeira, since there's a lot, namely the biggest one of Europe, full protected of Europe, and still 64.8 could not name a single one. So obviously this might be related to the fact that we use MPA and maybe they don't know what an MPA is, so it would be interesting in the future to assess this with other words maybe. So what we got from this was that there was a sure lack of knowledge and maybe a suggestion of a disconnection with the marine environment. At least for me, this is a very weird thing. So we thought it would be really interesting in the future to assess this possible disconnection between students and the sea, given its importance towards a sustainable future and all the ocean literacy cool research. Finally, some stakeholders raised the question of access to the ocean as being one of the main issues correlated to this disconnection. So it would be interesting to maybe assess this in the future. Since this idea is supported by ocean literacy again, that says that usually if you have more access to the ocean, you will have a better behavior towards the ocean. So, final conclusion and suggestion for the future. Obviously, better further assess the role of positive emotion in Madeira when affecting perception. And if found that it is indeed one of the main factors affecting this perception, it would be interesting to develop activities to create emotional connection with students and other parts of society, which again passes to this. That would be probably an effective way to work with a possible disconnection that has also to be further research, because obviously we can't really say there is. We can just raise the question that there might be. As for changes for the future, obviously we didn't have representativity with recreational fishers is always difficult, especially with our data. So it would also be interesting to redo it, but with bigger time, more time, so that we could assess more. We have obviously we have some data of local ecological knowledge that can be further explored and used for further research, and that's basically it. So, thank you very much. I would like to thank the support of Marina Saros and IMBRSea in this research, my supervisor and promoter, Paolo Parretti and Ana Diniz, and all my friends and family, and all of you for being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bernardo, for this very interesting study in
Thank you
data.
for listening to me.
I'd like to invite Professor Roserico to ask us
Yeah, I think it
questions.
was very interesting. A lot of responses, at least for three of the groups that you were questioning. But one thing is, when you are evaluating the emotions, I wonder if there is not a bias, because the people you were actually, it's not citizen perception, it's perception of three groups that actually take joy in activities in the ocean, because they are recreational fishermen, recreational diving, and students.
Mm-hmm.
And in the introduction you mentioned there were problems with construction, with tourism. Wouldn't it be more comprehensive to expand the citizen targets and include some tourists, maybe some administrative officers in Madeira, and maybe some people doing business other than recreation, like building?
Exactly. I see what you mean. Obviously, that was if we had more resources and time, that would be for sure the option, and that's something that I struggled with. But the fact is, even with this number of stakeholders, it was already pretty difficult to have a representative size, because obviously we are dealing with a lot of different entities that work in a lot of different ways. For example, for schools, I had to wait for an authorization for a month, and then for another almost another month. So I answered back, and then so all that bureaucratic problems really slowed down our process. And if that was not the case, we would have then tried to explore more stakeholder groups. Yeah. But unfortunately, 6 months, it's pretty. I feel like social sciences obviously relies a lot on people's intentions. For example, with fisheries, it's also difficult to get even a response. So it's a difficult one to do in such a short time.
Yeah, well, the problem is presented, I mean, it's a very challenging kind of subject, and we need a lot of information from the stakeholders and end users then to make decisions and to orientate our research. But the problem is that being aware of how limited the time and such things, the thing is that if you bias, I mean, it's then quite difficult to extract conclusions from a sample that is already kind of biased. You are trying to analyze what the social perception and the ecosystem services, and you go and ask those that are more emotionally positively attached to those services.
Yeah, I think that will be really interesting for the future.
Yeah,
I'll take that into consideration. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nico.
Yes, thank you very much. It was a very nice study. And I completely join what you said. That was one of my main questions. In fact, apart from this question of representativity of the population you have been looking at, you were too quick in the method. So,
do you want me to go back to the methods?
I did not understand when you do such a
Well,
survey.
I actually, yeah.
First, you have to know all the stakeholders. So you have 4. Maybe there were more.
But can I, sorry to interrupt.
No, I will just finish. And then for each stakeholder, you should answer the same question. Or maybe there could be a core of same question, but then there could be questions that, specific to each stakeholder. Such information was a little missing. Also, you said how many answers you received back, but you did not say how many you sent. So there was some details in the survey and the writing of the question that are maybe missing. So maybe you can say a little more about it.
Okay, so thank you very much for actually reminding me of something that I did not say. So first, which in going back to the conjunct question, is we also did select this because Marine Sabres is also now working. They started a few months after I did. So they were also trying to assess there, for example, talking with mariners, scientists, and other stakeholders. So this is a work that is going to support their work, and the objective was to not overpressure and waste resources in the same stakeholders. So as they were doing that, we decided to go with other types of stakeholders. So that answers, I think, one of the parts.
You synchronize the questions and the
Oh.
quality of the survey.
Sorry?
I mean, you have to be homogeneous in the objective of the survey between the different stakeholders. Maybe the question, the formulation of the question.
But what I mean with our support was through the perception tables. That is what they are doing. So the table that we used for our perceptions, it's what as I said in the slide before this, it's based on their table. So it just says one less because it didn't make sense for Madeira specifically, but we are using the same work as they are. So because that's the specific part that we are helping them. Then we have the first section and the third section, it's an extra for our specific work. Going to your second question, we did have stakeholder-specific questions. So the first and the second section were common to both of them because we wanted to see if these factors affected the perception of ecosystem services and threats. So we wanted to study as an overall and then separate into groups as we did. But the third part is it's for example this one. We didn't ask this to everyone. We asked this to kids. For example, the one that has MPAs, it was only for this group. So, sorry.
Why did you make this choice?
To separate them.
This question only to this stakeholder.
Because we wanted to assess ocean literacy with students specifically.
Why only ocean?
Because
you don't want to know if adults are literate.
Yeah, we would like to know, yeah. But honestly, we also didn't want to extend too much the survey because we thought that if it was too much, people would be less receptive. Yeah. Because we were already going with 3 pages, and sometimes people were like, 3 pages. So we wanted to try to avoid
Your answer, the format that you have been thinking about it, about how you designed the survey, what was the constraints, and what would be the most efficient. So you have been thinking, but from your presentation, I did not felt it. So
I understand.
It would have been better to spend a little more time on the survey, and you show too many graphs that are kind of raw graphs. I mean, histograms. So there are a lot of methods in sociology to analyze that kind of data set, that are doing some kind of data mining, bringing the main tendency in the data set. Did you think about it? We have a good data for it?
We are, obviously, we only finished sampling like mid-May because of all the constraints. So that's why, honestly, I haven't been able to analyze the data as much as I would like to have. And that's why it hasn't been submitted.
Yes, okay. So now you're answering to my last question, because with this amount of data, I was thinking there is enough to submit the manuscript, but you didn't have the time to analyze it because it became
it was a rush.
Yeah.
I was trying, but then at some point I was like,
maybe if I may have the last comments, you are a really motivated person with a lot of energy.
Thank you.
But I was happy not to be too close to you because with the stick you were really afraid. And so it's important to deliver the energy to the talk, but don't move.
Okay, yeah, I understand that. I've actually been called out for that. That's why I like.
You have press. And then,
Yeah, honestly, I thought I was way later on
yeah, and then
on
you
time.
watch all the time. And
Oh, because I was.
it made me really nervous. So, but very, very nice work.
Thank you very much for all your comments that will for sure be taken into consideration. Now, obviously, I also forgot that obviously this is a very complex work and this is not going to be solved, but as it's an exploratory approach, our objective was more to create question lines for the development of further research.
Thank you. Thank you, Bernardo. I don't have a lot of questions. Most of what I had in mind was nicely addressed by my colleagues. But I'd like to elaborate a bit further on the point of access to the ocean. What exactly you mean, and what would be the suggestions, how this would be tackled with more factual examples?
The coast. This is still, in my opinion, is a very arguable. No, sorry. I think this would be a very polemic still line of research because I feel like most people wouldn't agree with it, but I think it's still interesting to assess it. But why did stakeholders talk about this? Because the coastline, especially in Funchal, it's really restricted because of hotels and just clubs, like high-class clubs and others. So it is difficult to find free access to the ocean. It's really difficult in Funchal.
So it's really remaining for an elite.
It's hotels, or if you need to pay to access the beach.
Are there a lot of private access?
There's in Funchal, center of Funchal, there's one free zone, and then just a bit to the side you have two of them, but also small. So there's not really, even if you want to go to the beach in Funchal, you need to move to the specific addressed areas for people that are not willing to pay to access the ocean. So that's one of the factors that might be interesting to understand in the future. But this is more of a local problem of Funchal. It's not so much if you go to the rest of the island. Because it's now, this is more because of hotels and especially restricted club areas.
Now I understand more about the idea behind why it would impair population access
It's
knowledge and literacy about the ocean.
So it was really interesting because I'm passionate actually about ocean literacy. Was just my way of introducing a social dimension to my research, and it actually ended up going back to ocean literacy.
Do you have you made a remark about the other the fact that a high percentage, almost roughly 65%, could not name any of there are 3 MPAs.
There are actually a lot of MPAs, which is why I was shocked with this. So I'm gonna get my. I'm sorry, Lars. Well, you lost it. Where did I? Oh, damn! I put it too far. Well, it's inside. So it was actually
Get back. We need it for the normal lecture.
we'll have to get something to. And so we have the one of Garajal here close to Funchal, and we have another one here, another one here, another one here, another one here. Also, there's a complex of protected areas in Porto Santo, and both the inhabited islands have its totality protected. This one being the biggest full protected MPO of Europe, it's the Selvagens. It has a radius of 12 nautical miles. It's about 2,677 square kilometers.
You said it could be by the way that the question was posed. What would you suggest instead to formulate the question in which way? Because then you gave me the impression that people know this exists, but they don't know the nomenclature for it.
Because we did not provide a definition of what an MPA was, because we wanted to also see if people knew what an MPA was.
So, but what was the question exactly?
So we asked, the question was, can you name 3 marine protected areas of Madeira, or of the archipelago of Madeira? I apologize, people from Porto Santo. When
how would you formulate it different than?
I feel like maybe I would put down a definition of what it is, or maybe, because the thing is, why is this? Why am I talking about this? Because people sometimes don't mention these marine protected areas as marine protected areas. They will call it natural reserve, or I'm missing actually the other one. But they will not say marine protected area. So maybe if we say marine protected area slash natural reserve slash natural parks, maybe because most of these are not officially called marine protected area of. They are, for example, this one is natural reserve of Verajal. So maybe they just don't associate the name of the zone and the word MPA. And that's why I meant with maybe we can use different words.
Unfortunately, we do have time for questions, but we have
You can ask.
a coffee break, so I invite you to continue the discussions
and I'll try to get the thing out.
And once again, thank you very much to the jury, thank you for the audience, and another round of applause to the three speakers of this morning session.
I didn't know that. so just wait, or good go.
No. Your family or
Sorry.
anyone who's watching online.
Okay. Perfect.
I will do a quick introduction as well.
Sure.
And in 10 minutes of your talk, I will give you a 5-minute warning. We're not really looking this way, but maybe Karen will give you a 5-minute warning. There's 5 minutes left. Just do this. Yeah. See, we're good? Okay, welcome everybody to the final session on the second day of diving into marine mines at the University of Oviedo. Joining me today we have Ada, who will be presenting on interactions between octopus and fishes and during collective hunting, and Marion, who will be presenting on Dublin in the Dutch Wadden. We also have members, my name is Ian O'Connor, I'll be chairing this session, and members of the jury, Mario, Julio, and Karim, who will be deciding on your performance, but I'm sure it will be great. I wish you the very best of luck and enjoy it.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ada Saki, and I'm very excited to talk to you today about my master thesis work about the role of interactions between octopus and fishes during collective hunting. So let's first start by introducing collective hunting. This is an associative foraging strategy which generally increases the chances of all individuals present in collective hunts to acquire prey. And it has been studied mainly in intraspecific groups, so groups formed by individuals of the same species across a different range of taxa in the animal kingdom, starting with terrestrial mammals such as monkeys and lions, but also in marine mammals such as orcas and dolphins, as well as in birds like hawks and ravens, and also in fish like sailfish and goldfish. However, group hunting, collective hunting, also exists in intraspecific groups. And multispecific groups were exactly the topic of my thesis. In particular, I studied groups formed by octopus and different species of fish. A peculiarity of these multispecific groups is that the species in the group follow their own hunting strategies, which they have evolved independently. But they coordinate the timings of the hunt. As they hunt, they prey upon the same items. In this case, they all have a generalist diet. So what do we know about the interactions between octopus and fishes during collective hunting? We know that from the fishes towards the octopus, there are some signals that exist from some grouper species, which the groupers also send to morails in similar kind of hunts. And these signals, you can see them in the video displayed. They're the head shake and the headstand, which are followed by recruitment of the receivers. So in this case, the morails in this video, but the same happens with octopuses. However, not much is known about the message transmission from the direction of the octopus towards the fishes. We thought that skin patterns may be a good candidate to potentially explain part of the message transmission from the octopus towards the fishes. And this is due to the fact that they're an extremely relevant phenomenon in all cephalopods, so octopus, but also squid and cuttlefish, and they happen very rapidly thanks to the contraction and expansion of particular cells, which are present in the skin of the cephalopods and are called chromatophores. In fact, skin patterns have been primarily attributed to a camouflage function in order to deceive predators, but several authors have also suggested that they may play a role in inter- and intraspecific communication. In this context, the aim of this master thesis was to study the interactions between octopus and fishes during collective hunting by exploring the behaviors as well as the skin patterns both of octopuses and fishes. Moving on to the methodology, the data was collected by scuba diving in Israel Israel in 2018 over the course of the month of October. And it was collected by 2 divers at the same time using 3 cameras. So 2 cameras were wide lens cameras positioned on a structure we called stereo camera rig, where they were fixed on the 2 opposite extremes of an aluminum bar, and having a fixed distance between each other, it was possible with the videos coming from these cameras to have a reconstruction of the habitat as well as of the movement of the animals during the hunt within this habitat. Additionally, a 3rd camera was used. This was we called it zoom camera, and it was a camera with a different lens, which was used to focus on the interactions between octopus and fishes during the hunt. With this, of the data collected with this methodology, 13 videos were used, corresponding to 13 events of collective hunting, and reaching a total length of approximately 3 hours and a half of filming. These videos were also divided into time blocks, which were subgroups of 100 seconds of video each. From these videos, movement data was extracted, and thanks to the 2 wide lens cameras that I just mentioned, I will tell you about the variables that I use when I will present the results, because I think it will make it less confusing. And additionally, many manual annotations were performed on the videos, which I will talk about in my next slides. Concerning the octopus, 3 patterns were annotated. The destructive, which you can see on the left, where the octopus's skin shows strong contrast. The stripe, which is a longitudinal white stripe running across the mantle of the octopus, starting from the head. And the ruff, which was a pattern which related more so to texture than to color, and is caused by the raising of the papillae, which are particular structures present in the octopus's skin. And additionally, 2 patterns were annotated for the 2 grouper species that can sometimes be found in these hunting groups. The whitehead stripe of the lyre-tail grouper, which is a white stripe that runs from the mouth across the dorsal part, mid-dorsal part of the body of the fish, and the dark head of the black-tip grouper, which occurs when the fish has a darker head compared to the rest of the body, which is paler. Behaviors were also annotated, and in particular, displacements among fishes were annotated, and these occur when a fish approaches another and causes the movement of the second fish away from its original position within 1 second of the approach. A particular kind of displacement were the punches. So in this case, it was the octopus that was displacing fishes, and the way it achieved it was extending its arms and striking at the fish, causing therefore its displacement. Web overs of the octopus were also annotated. These are part of the hunting strategy of the octopus, and they consist in the octopus extending its arms, expanding its interbrachial web, so the skin in between the arms, in order to envelop an object on the substrate, such as a rock or a coral, and potentially capture the prey that may be hidden under it or within it. Finally, display of the octopus, the passing cloud, was also annotated. This is a moving visual display because we can see that there are waves of lighter color which run through the body of the octopus, which generally has a darker background. And this causes an illusion of movement while the animal is actually sitting still. Moving on to the results, I'll first give you a general overview of the data. On the pictures, you can see the 6 species that were considered in the analysis, as they were the ones that were the most consistently present throughout the dataset. So we have, of course, the octopus, which is the day octopus in this case, and the long barbel goldfish, the yellow saddle goldfish, as well as its juvenile form, which differs from the adult both in color, as you can see from the picture, but also in general morphology and behavior. And finally, two species of grouper, the black-tipped grouper and the lighter grouper, the ones the patterns were annotated for. On the bar plot on the right side, you can see on the x-axis different fish species, and on the y-axis the proportion of time blocks where each species occurred, where each species was present. In the bars, you can see the number of blocks where the species was present out of the total of 107 blocks the data was divided into. As you can see, the data is extremely heterogeneous. The octopus is here not represented because it was present. It was the only species that was present in all the videos that were considered for the analysis. The second bar plot has a similar structure to the previous one. So again, on the y-axis, we have the proportion out of the time blocks. And in this case, on the x-axis, we have on the left side the 5 patterns annotated, and on the right side, the behaviors. In this case, each behavior and pattern is here represented as it was occurring in at least once per block. We can see that the dark head and the white head stripes, so the 2 patterns annotated for the fishes, didn't occur in many time blocks, and for this reason, they were not considered in the analysis. The same reasoning was applied to the pattern clouds displayed on the octopus.
5 minutes.
Moving on to the results of the statistical analysis, we saw that with chi-square tests, we saw that the punches of the octopus were associated with the disruptive pattern of the octopus, and interestingly, also the behavior of the group seemed to be associated with the disruptive pattern. And in fact, the displacements among fishes were found to be correlated with this pattern. And finally, punches and displacements occurrences were also correlated with each other. So aggressive behaviors seem to occur more in the same time blocks. Group size was also found to influence skin patterns, and this was studied with generalized linear models, which showed that in bigger groups, the stripe pattern was more frequently expressed, whereas in smaller groups, the rough pattern was more often expressed. And this is also shown by the box and binding plot that you can see on the right, where the yellow dots represent the means, and the patterns are on the x-axis, whereas the number of individuals in the group is on the y-axis. Finally, the presence and absence of some fish species was also found to be associated with octopus skin patterns and group movement. The presence, in particular, of the yellow saddle goldfish, this fish right here on the top right of the slide, was found to be linked to the occurrence of the rough pattern in the octopus. In fact, when the yellow saddle goldfish was absent, the octopus displayed more the rough pattern. The presence of this fish was also found to be associated with group movement. In particular, when the fish was present, the centroid displacement, which is a measure of movement of the group, was higher. In particular, the centroid displacement is measured as the mean position of all individuals in the group across time frames. So more dynamic groups corresponded to groups where this fish was present. And this was tested with a man-with-me test. I forgot to mention that the yellow saddle goldfish presence and rough pattern was tested with a chi-square test. So we can conclude that the octopus skin patterns and behaviors were relevant to the dynamics of the collective hunts. And however, this study had some limitations. In particular, to start with, all the analyses were performed comparing time blocks, and the time blocks were of 100 seconds, so this is not a particularly refined timescale, and probably a more probabilistic approach, such as a Markov chain analysis, could give more accurate results. In addition, skin patterns for the analysis were discretized, and in nature, they constitute a continuum. So there are many more changes than the ones I annotated, but also it is hard to discern when there is a change from a pattern to another. This was partly addressed by selecting a few skin patterns, but probably a machine-based learning approach could give more accurate results again. Patterns, finally, are also related to habitat. In particular, the rough pattern seems to be correlated with its habitat, as it might be linked to camouflage and to trying to imitate the environmental background. And for this, to disentangle this, analyzing videos of the octopus hunting alone might, and comparing the results to the ones of these analyses, might give us some more insights. Finally, I would like to thank my supervisor, Eduardo Sampaio, as well as the whole department of all the people I met in the Department of Collective Behavior for their support, for their help, and for creating a super interesting and stimulating environment, as well as my fieldwork buddies and Piero Durat for the wonderful drawings that you saw during the presentation. And of course, I thank you very much for your attention.
So I'd like to invite members of the jury to ask questions. Who'd like to go first? Okay, thank you.
I can start. Thank you, very interesting presentation. So this is not Octopus vulgaris.
This is Octopus cyanea, the day octopus, has an Indo-Pacific distribution.
I was wondering, could you tell from your analysis who initiates this joint hunting exhibition more? Is it more the octopus or the fish?
So this is a complicated question. It's not part of my work. It was more the work of my supervisor, Eduardo Sampaio. He has been working on studying the social networks in these systems. And in fact, it seems that it is the octopus the octopus, when it initiates the movement, it is more often followed, but there are other fishes in the groups that also initiate movement very frequently. So it is a very complex system with very complex dynamics. The leadership seems to be actually shared. It doesn't seem to belong to just one species or one individual. And it can vary over the course of the hunt. There are some fish species which have more of an exploitative role, like the black-tip grouper. Go back to... Okay, the black-tip grouper, this one. We can see that very often the groups with many black-tip groupers are very static because they don't initiate movement. In fact, this is related to their hunting strategies, their ecological strategy of hunting normally also when they're by themselves. They're ambush predators, so they wait for the prey to arrive and then just move in that moment. And so they don't tend to pull the group. But what is interesting again here is that these fish, they don't initiate the movement, but they seem to influence when the movement is going to happen. So if the groupers don't move, the rest of the group often doesn't move. In fact, these were analyses that were performed with a pull and anchor method, which was developed by Strandberg and Peshkin in 2015, I think, and was partially adapted. And it was studied with, so pulls and anchors are leadership attempts linked to initiation of movement, where a pull is a successful leadership attempt. So one fish moves, the group follows, and an anchor is a leadership attempt that is unsuccessful. So a fish moves, the group doesn't follow. In the case of the black-tip groupers, they don't attempt much, but they anchor the group a lot, And when they do poop, it's interesting because the few times that they do move, the group seems to move very often to follow them. So it seems that somehow the fact that they're not very active in general in the search for prey gives a clue to the other group members about the fact that when they do look for prey, there is really an opportunity. Otherwise, they wouldn't have moved.
What I have a hard time understanding is what are the benefits for the octopus? Looks to me like the fish are more likely to benefit because the octopus envelops a rock or something and flushes the prey out. How does the octopus benefit from this? What are the fish doing for the octopus?
Well, there are some fishes which search a lot more. So the octopus, we saw that there is a difference in web over frequency and duration when certain fishes are present and certain are not. In particular, the yellow saddle goatfish, this one and this one, it's a very dynamic species. It's normally it hunts searching the substrate, but it moves a lot. It moves also there were changes of speed recorded. It moves very, very fast, and so it can search more areas. And it seems that when this fish is present, the octopus performs less web overs that last longer, whereas when it's absent, it performs more web overs, but with a shorter duration. In fact, telling about the benefits is hard in the system because the octopus, because of its anatomy, it has the mouth under the arms, right in the middle, and we cannot see it when it does web overs if it actually eats. But we thought that the duration of the web over might be a proxy to indicate if the octopus is feeding. And so if the web overs last longer when the yellow saddle goatfish is present, it maybe means that the fish is hunting, is searching a lot, and so when the octopus does a web over, it has more probabilities to actually capture prey, or it happens more often. This is the idea.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the show. Interesting, curious. And get some questions. Do fish and the octopus hunt alone?
So the octopus is the octopus.
Always hunt in group.
The octopus, yes, generally, unless seen with fish, normally it's reported hunting alone. In fact, well, in general, octopuses have been regarded for a long time as very solitary animals. There have been several studies in the last year which show that they're also social, but in terms of foraging, normally they're pretty solitary. For the other group members, we know that the yellow saddle goatfish also hunts in groups. They can hunt together. Very often they can be seen in pairs, for instance, hunting. And yeah, in this case, it seems like they follow a very simple distance rules. So according to the distance from each other, they decide if following each other or not. And for the other species, it's a little bit harder because there is not so much known about their biology. I found a little bit of information about the black-tipped grouper that seems to suggest that sometimes they're seen together resting at the bottom, which corresponds to their hunting strategy basically because they just sit there. So maybe they hunt together.
The idea is to talk about collective hunting. You need to demonstrate that there is a benefit hunting together. So
that's
how
why
could you plan an experiment or how to evaluate cost and benefit of hunting together, hunting alone, hunting collectively? So
yeah. I just want to emphasize that the reason why I didn't
to make a cost-benefit analysis of this strategy?
Well,
because that's the critical part.
Yeah, partly with the pools and anchors, and partly with some new experiments. And actually, the data that I presented was not collected by. I didn't take part in the collection, but I was 2 months during fieldwork in Japan, where I collected some new data with my supervisor, and we tried to also set up some experiments that could, in fact, disentangle the question about the sharing, the the benefits for each individual, but it's hard because of the hunting strategy of the octopus. The idea there was to use some PVC structures which are empty inside. I had a hole to make light enter, a camera inside them, place some fish in them, and see how the octopus reacts to that if it hunts on these structures, and if the fish do, and in this way trying to see who actually captures the prey, and so how much are the benefits for the different group members.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Really nice presentation. You were transmitting joy, and that's really important in this business. I think I've been misguided, my bad, for the collective hunting term. I was expecting cooperation. Was you expecting cooperation too, or?
Well, it's a bit the one of the questions. So there are lots of definitions of cooperation, collaboration that don't agree with each other about how many are the benefits for the different group members, and yeah, it is something we haven't we don't have precise answers to yet.
My question also implies that does this collective hunting sometimes include cooperation? I mean, in other systems, because I haven't read anything about that. Does it include cooperation?
Well, yes. For example, in monospecific groups, for sure. Like there is also sharing of the prey, and all the individuals get a specialized role, which however it's different because here each fish or the octopus has a role that they have evolved, but they don't specialize for the hunt. In mammals, for example, in lions, there is in the mammals where it happens, there is a social. There are animals that exhibit social behaviors, and so there is a social structure, and each individual has a specific role and cooperates with the other for the hunt.
I'm asking because I remember some studies in terrestrial systems of one species using the signal produced by all the species.
Also, yeah, dishonest signals.
The signals are not intended, I would say, it's just that they are following them. It's interesting, but I think it's quite hard, because I would say cooperation versus competition would also depend on the amount of resources, and that seems hard to measure. I'm just giving you a picture. This is something absolutely very nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience?
Did you do any analysis of prey accumulation? So looking at like the successive trips in conjunction with different pairs of fish in the octopus?
No, because it's very hard to see how much prey they actually catch. Like when I was on the field, in 2 months, 103 dives, I saw once a fish with a prey. So it's very hard to evaluate. I didn't do it, and it would be great. The problem is also this is something that is very nice to study on the field, very hard to study in the lab. So it would be very hard to study this under control conditions because they're transient groups. They're not permanent. They can vary in size, in species composition, and yeah, so they're very hard to reproduce. There were some people in Japan, in the institute where I was hosted, who actually tried a little bit to reproduce this system in an aquarium with a couple of fish and an octopus, species that normally are seen hunting with the octopus, but in controlled environment, nothing seems to happen. The hunts don't happen that way. And this is also something interesting because it suggests that the occurrence of the hunt might be related to habitat, which is also a line of research that my supervisor is working on and starting to think about. Because it might be that there must be certain environmental and habitat conditions for the hunts to happen.
Okay, that's it. Congratulations, David. Well done. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so our next speaker is also early, going to be talking about truly the best of all the species, birds.
For sure.
So again, 15 minutes, and when 10 minutes are gone, either I or Karen will give you a 5-minute warning. So very best of luck.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the introduction. So I'm Marlijn Hulsenboom, and I perform my master thesis with the NIOS in the Netherlands about the habitat use of the dunlin in the Dutch Wadden Sea. So the Wadden Sea is the largest coherent intertidal system in the world, and it's in the Netherlands, in Germany, and in Denmark. And a special feature about this Wadden Sea is it consists of many intertidal flats. And these flats submerge during high tide, but they become available during low tide, as you can see in this picture on the left. And therefore it forms a vital part for migratory birds along the East Atlantic Flyway. They migrate, for example, from the Arctic all the way to Africa. And they stop over in the Dutch Wadden Sea to forage on the intertidal flats that consist of many benthal species like worms and shrimp and crab. As you can see, for example, this rat knot doing here. However, the Wadden Sea is under pressure of many threats, and one of those is sea level rise. And this has implications for not only the availability of the intertidal flats that are likely to submerge, but also on the benthals within these intertidal flats. And therefore it's important to identify the important habitats, for example, the foraging areas, or migratory birds foraging on them. So this study is about the dunlin. It's the most abundant shorebird in the Netherlands, with over 1 million individuals visiting the Wadden Sea each year. And they also forage on the benthic fauna on the intertidal flats. However, in the entire Wadden Sea, the population has been decreasing, as you can see here in this graph. And therefore it's important to understand more about this bird. Apart from this, the dunlin is very interesting to study because it has a large variability in morphology, for example through bill length, which leads to different types of foraging behavior and potentially also differences in space use. But the dunlin is actually very understudied in the Wadden Sea. For example, just until recently, the diet was known of this species. And actually tracking of this species, which happens a lot for migratory species, but was not possible because it's a very, very small bird. But with recent techniques, it has been possible to track these birds last summer in 2022, which is the data I'm using for my thesis. So, for my thesis I had these research questions. I wanted to understand the space use of dunlins in the Dutch Wadden Sea, and I looked at the entire tidal cycle with the space use. But in this presentation I will only look on the preferred foraging areas due to time. So, I did resource selection modeling for the foraging, and I had the following research questions. First, I wanted to know is dunlins select foraging grounds with higher abundances of certain prey, as we expected that some prey might be preferential, and they would select foraging patches with high abundances of their prey. Moreover, I wanted to know if the selection changes over time. So, for example, we've seen this for other bird species because some prey species become unavailable through time, and therefore they might change their selection. And lastly, I want to know if there's individual variation in the selection, which might be related to bill length. As I explained before, difference in bill length lead to differences in foraging strategy, potentially differences in prey, and therefore also in resource selection. So this is my study area. This is where the Research Institute was located in the Western Wadden Sea, and the study is focused around the island of Giet, with very large intertidal flats around the island. This is an aerial picture. It's an uninhabited island and a very important bird hotspot. So I used 3 different types of data sets for my study. I used tracking data, I used data of the
abundances, and lastly we used tidal data to understand when the mudflats would be available or not. So in July and August there were 2 catching trips and 36 dunlins were captured using mist netting, as you can see in this photo. And these dunlins were all tagged with lightweight reverse GPS tags that gave out a position every 8 seconds. So it's a very high resolution data set. Tags stayed on for, on average, 4 weeks. And therefore we obtained up to almost 3 million positions within a period of 2 months. So here you can see a dunlin being ready for release with a small tag on the end. And from all these tagged dunlins we obtained the watt loss tracks. As you can see here on this map, where every color represents one individual flying in a certain period of time. But for my resource selection analysis, I didn't want to know where they flew to, but actually where they stayed to forage. So therefore, after thinning of the tracking data, I calculated the residence patches. And these are patches where the dunlin resided for a longer period of time. And this led to maps such as this, where you can see the track of one dunlin from high to high tide, and all the colored places are the patches where the dunlin stayed for, well, up from 2 minutes up to like 82 minutes, as you can see here. So in total, we obtained almost 6,000 residence patches around the island of Ghent, but this was over the entire tidal period. So I only wanted to look on the foraging patches, which happens during low tide. And therefore, after filtering, we have a minimum duration of 10 minutes to only have the dunlins or the residence patches where they stayed for a longer period, and the water level of less than minus 20 centimeters during low tide. I obtained the following foraging patches. As you can see, they were mostly located like southeast of the island, and the size of the dot here represents the duration of this residence patch in hours. So we now have all the use locations, but to model the resource selection, it's also important to understand where they have not been. And therefore, I used the use availability design following these papers, where we first have the use patches, and then the calculator availability patches, as they're called, where for each use location, for example here, 15 random locations were selected randomly across the available mudflat. And this led to the following use availability design, and as you can see here, all the light gray dots represent the points where the dunlin has not been at a certain moment, and the green dots are again the places where the dunlin has actually been. So for each of these locations, we wanted to know the benthos abundances. And we initially considered 5 different prey species, Hedista and Scoloplos, which are 2 worms, the mud snail Poringia ulvae, and the shrimp and the crab. And we used the data from the seabed survey carried out in August 2022. This is a very large intertidal benthic survey across the entire Dutch Wadden Sea, and it's happening on a yearly basis. So here you can see all the sampling points across the mudflat around Ghent. And these points were then locked and transformed and interpolated using kriging, which resulted in like resource landscapes like this. And therefore it's possible to have the abundance around Ghent for every location. However, the sampling method of seabed was not made for mobile species such as the shrimp and crab, and therefore we didn't have enough data to properly interpolate the abundances of these species. So we couldn't take them into account in our analysis. So, to come to the final model, I used a generalized linear mixed effect model in order to take into account the random effect per individual. A priori, we decided to include all the prey species, so Hedista, Poringia, and Scoloplos, but I applied a model selection to understand the interaction with the capture batch, so either being captured in August or in September, to account for the temporal variation. And for this, I used the log ratio test. Now, after testing, we got to the final model, where the presence of the dunlin has been modeled as a function of the abundance of Hedista, plus the abundance of Scoloplos, plus the abundance of Beringia with an interaction with batch, so for temporal variation, plus the different random slopes for each tag. And lastly, for the part with the bill length, we extracted the random slopes per individual after the model, and then we tried to correlate this to the bill length in order to understand if individuals with longer bills would have a higher higher degree of selection. So, here's the output. So the random part represents the individual variation and is the standard deviations, while the fixed part, we have the estimate of the actual selection, the standard error, and whether this was significant or not. So first for Hediste, we see there's a significant positive selection for high abundances of Hediste. And this is also visible on the map, on the graph, I mean. So on the x-axis we have the log10 transformed abundance of Hediste, and on the y-axis the resource selection. And the resource selection is not a proxy for like the probability of occurrence, but it's a scale between 0 and 1 in order to have a relative degree of selection. And in gray is the confidence interval, and the ticks above the graph represent the used points. So here you can see there's a positive selection for Hediste. For Beringia, we actually found a seasonal effect. So in August, there was no selection for Beringia, but in September, there actually was, as you can see here. And again, the random effect was quite large in this place. Lastly, for Scoloplos, we didn't find any significant selection for Scoloplos, but a very high individual variation. This is also visible in the figure. Lastly, the correlation to bill length. On the x-axis is the bill length in centimeters, and then the y-axis the extracted random slope. The R represents a Pearson correlation R. And as you can see, there is not really any effect of bill length on the individual variation in selection. So what does this all mean? Well, first of all, for Hediste, we found a positive selection. And this has also been found in a different study carried out in the Dutch Wadden Sea. So it's kind of like as expected. For Beringia, we only found selection later in the season, so a temporal effect. So this later selection could be due to a lower availability of other prey species. This has been found for red knots as well, that they also red knots only selected for Beringia late in the season, but not earlier. Lastly, for Scoloplos, we didn't find any selection. But does this mean that there's actually no selection for Scoloplos at all? Well, Scoloplos actually is the most prevalent prey species in the Netherlands, and it occurs in very high densities. So therefore, it might be that there's actually no selection necessary, or that selection occurs on a larger scale, for example, the scale of the Wadden Sea. We didn't find any selection for shrimp and crab. Would this largely affect our results? Well, actually, shrimp is occurring in lower abundances in September compared to August. So actually, the moving out of the area of shrimp might explain the selection only late season for Beringia. So this might be the missing link, but we don't know at the moment. Lastly, as we didn't find any individual variation correlated to bill length, it could be explained by the fact that dunlins are actually a gregarious species, and they follow each other when selecting for residence patches, for foraging patches. So it might be that this selection is not really like an individual related to bill length, but is more occurring on a larger scale as they are highly social and following each other. So, in short, we did find that dunlins do select residence patches based on abundances of prey, and there's a seasonal effect. As I said, the Wadden Sea is very likely to change through sea level rise, as there might be less habitat available for the shorebirds. But moreover, there's also a decrease of prey abundances. This was a study carried out in the German Wadden Sea, so not in the Dutch Wadden Sea, where they compared the abundances of prey to the abundances in the 1980s. And you can see there's actually a large decrease in prey availability for the dunlin. Well, right now we don't really know what the effect of climate change on the dunlins will be, but at least we now better understand to which places the dunlin go and how we can relate that to what's actually in the mudflat available. These are my references. I want to thank my supervisors, I want to thank the people from NEOS who helped me greatly, my great office mates, and thank you very much for listening, and are there any questions?
So we'll pass over to the jury to commence with some questions first. Shall I start? Thank you, Marcel. Okay, nice presentation again, really clear. I was expecting by reading the abstract a bit more discussion or content about changing between foraging and roosting areas.
Yeah.
And that was perhaps the previous plan.
I really wanted to talk about that as well. I talked about it in the previous presentation, but that one was like 25 minutes. So in order to explain the entire roosting part, which I found very interesting and I would love to talk to you about it, but like in time frame it's just not possible to explain it properly. So I had to focus on one part.
I have a minor question on the methods. Could you just say again, how did you get the availability data?
Yeah. I do have extra slides, by the way, if you want to have more. Okay. I have extra slides about the roosting part, if you want. Yeah. So, like, it's, for example, when you're carrying out a survey and you're just sailing and looking left and right, if there's like whales, for example, okay, there's no whale, it's an absence. So we don't really have these absences for the tracking data, so we had to come up with something else, which has been explained by, well, these papers. So we have the use patches, but then for each use patch, we want to know the places where the dunlin actually was not present at that certain moment. And therefore, like, we took the water level for each use patch. So, for example, when the water level was 0 centimeters, I only looked like on the mudflat, on the available mudflat for 0 centimeters. And then from that available mudflat, 15 random locations were taken.
So
as an availability patch.
Were not there. The dunlins were not there.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Yeah. So for each use point, we have 15 points where the dunlin was not available.
And my point is, and this is just something to consider in the future, if you want. I would say that comparing presence or use versus random forces the models a lot, because there's no randomness normally in this behavior. So I would advise to explore another option. I'm coming from the habitat sensing model, so in this case I'm not sure which one to be, but perhaps using as availability those spots where dunlins just passed by. They were there just a shorter time. This is just an idea, because like I said,
where they passed by instead of where they were actually residing, you mean?
Come again?
You mean like where they passed by but were actually not...
Because random memory forces, they sometimes produce really naive models. I'm not saying this is the case. I'm just looking out.
Yeah, we could at least like, because well, this method has been used before, but like, as I understand you now also, I also take into account the places where the dunlins were not at all, or what?
Don't want to take any of it. Just check pseudo absences in the literature and you will get what I mean. It's just not using any place, just a place that, well, it might be used but not that often.
Okay. Yeah, but we do know that they actually occurred, like there's residence patches around the entire island of Giet, like so the entire mudflat. So in that way, we kind of also took into account that the dunlins could have been present there, and it might have been, like flying by, but not actually sitting there. But thank you, I will look it up.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Yeah, you have of questions. Do you have an idea of the diet of the birds at each patch? Do you know what they are actually eating?
Yes, so this is actually the project of my supervisor and also one of my colleagues, Jana. I think she's listening right now. She also looked into the diet. So what she did is they took videos of foraging dunlins and they analyzed the intakes of these dunlins at each location. And as far as I know, they did find, like, for example, individual differences in bill length and the behavior carried out. So either pecking, which is like taking, for example, a shrimp, or probing, which is like they go with the bill deep in the mudflat, like probe for them. So they did find like variability in that, but they didn't find any spatial variability in prey inspected.
Differences in diet at different patches, or because they can be selecting some particular patch, not because that indicator species polychaete is there, but because the environmental is different, because some environmental properties differs, and so the polychaete can be just rocks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they are eating the polychaete or eating the mollusk.
Yeah, we do know that they're eating these individuals, but at least like the distributions of these different prey species were not completely overlapping. So it was not like that they were all the high abundances were at every patch, because then of course you can't really know if they select because of high abundances of Hedister or high abundance of Apringia, but there was some spatial variation in that. And actually, the dunlins that have been tagged, the excrements of these dunlins have also been collected. And my PhD supervisor is at the moment now analyzing what was in the excrements. So then we better also know like what prey were actually ingested. Because I agree with you, like with on these locations, like you know that they're there and that they're residing there and they're probably foraging, but you still don't know what they're actually intaking at certain points.
Yes, and these animals fly in groups and move in groups, so grouping behavior can affect selection. So how group behavior can modify selection of different patches. So if it was an individual decision, so that's perfect. But if it's a group decision, that's more difficult, because if the groups are very large, and sometimes it's a matter of
yes. So actually,
randomness, that they select one place or another.
Yeah. So this paper by Vollmer in 2010, this person actually applied resource selection modeling for different bird species in the Dutch Wadden Sea that are some are highly solitary and other were highly social. And indeed, this person found that birds that were gregarious, such as the dunlins, are actually having a very large standard deviation in how much they selected. So at least like this grouping behavior is certainly affecting the way of selection for these patches. And he also advised that therefore it's necessary to monitor these species over longer periods of time. And apart from that, like Hedister is also occurring around the mudflats still in high abundances, but the exact spatial distribution is different from year to year. So myself, I think it would be very nice to carry out this study in multiple years. I think dunlins will be tagged again this summer, and then we could like apply resource selection again and again to also see if they, well, still go to high abundances of Hedister, even if they're in a different place around the mudflat, and again, like take into account the social component a bit better.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting talk. So I was wondering, you have a big area, and there's clearly some selection of areas by the species. But can you tell something about more fine-scale movements during? I mean, do they feed during the whole? How long do they feed during the
now we get again to the species of the entire cycle I wanted to talk about as well. So there's also been, with the same video analysis, there's been a study according to the time budgets, where at least, like in different moments in the tidal cycle, they looked at like which percentage of the group was foraging and which percentage of the group was actually sleeping. But this was actually quite stable over the entire low tide period. But of course, like during high tide, these mudflats are not available anymore. So then they go roosting, as it's that's the name for it. So they either roost and rest around the island of Giet, but we've also found that they fly to Richel for higher water levels. This is like an island about 10 kilometers away. But then actually, when the tide goes out again, they go back to Giet to forage around there. So Giet is really the foraging hotspot, and Richel is more like the roosting hotspot. But well, the mudflats are not that large around Richel, and there's also not the benthos abundances are not as high, so therefore they come back. Yeah, but like when there's prey available, they eat. Yeah, the small birds, they need to gain a lot of fat in order to continue the journey. Yeah.
Can you use your models to predict, like which areas they're going to more likely go to, or?
That would be the next step. Yes. With the model as it is right now, I don't necessarily think. But if we carry out this model like for more over time, for multiple years, I think it might become possible to predict. But it's also the Dunlins are kind of they have some sort of site fidelity. Like these Dunlins were captured on Giet or on Richel, and they mostly stayed around Giet and Richel. But we also know there's other populations of Dunlin. I can see I've got the map. No, I don't have it. Well, in the entire Wadden Sea. So then in order to predict for other areas, we should kind of expand this tracking system to the rest of the Wadden Sea, and also like start capturing the birds over there as well.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the audience?
Party.
You talked about the bill length varying. Did I read you right that they can almost 10 centimeters of?
It's in millimeters.
And were you surprised to not find a significance predictor in your model based on that?
Kind of, yes. Because like from the video analysis, it was found that individuals with longer bills spend more time probing. So like probing in the mudflat, and this probing behavior is related to well, ingestion of worms. So it kind of expected that well, the longer-billed individuals would have like higher selection for Hedistens colobos compared to shorter-billed individuals. But apparently it's not the case. Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yes?
Yeah.
So this was on the route of the flyway. How long did they spend at these islands if they only one?
Yeah, a month or two, something like that. It depends from subspecies to subspecies as well. For example, we have one subspecies, Shinzi, that actually winters in the Netherlands. And others, like, they're quite large breeding grounds and wintering grounds, but in general, a month or two. So we actually, we found in our tracks some tag birds that moved to Mauritania. So all of a sudden they disappeared. It's quite fun to see in the tracks.
What's the tidal range in that area? What is the tidal range?
So I think my highest high tide was like 137 centimeters, and the lowest was like -80, so more or less 2 meters. But with these flats, it goes very quickly. Yeah.
Any other questions in the room? Yes.
So you said that the donut is very often around the entire Sea. How far is this around the island of Giet? Is it representative for what is happening
Yeah, so the population around Ghent is actually quite large. I don't have exact numbers, but like there's for sure, it's not like the majority of the Dunnins in the Dutch Wetland Sea. But well, there's also of course the field work that you have to take into account. So there's catching trips around Richel and Ghent every month from the Niels. But then, yeah, to scale it up, we at first should expand the Watlas system, which is actually happening as we talk. But then also different catching trips should be undertaken. And I'm not really sure if that's going to happen, to be honest. So I think it is representative in a way. Yeah, but
Any other questions? Yes.
You have a designated field on your data. Can you tell a bit more about the 10 million? Is it just arbitrary or?
yeah, so in order to calculate these foraging patches, I had to kind of make a lot of arbitrary decisions. This 10 minutes comes from the paper by Albert Bijleveld in 2016. He uses that too. So then you have to set the filter somewhere. And for example, for the water level, I also did resource selection modeling for a water level of 0 centimeters, but also, for example, from 2.5 hours to low tide and 3 hours after. As you know, there's many ways to calculate the foraging patches, but then actually I had the same results. So it's kind of robust. And we came up with minus 20 centimeters as this is the level for which the entire range of availability of prey species is there. And well, I also kind of looked with my supervisor at these foraging patches, as she knows from the field where they're actually foraging and where they're resting. So that's how we got to this.
Okay, any other questions?
Okay, thank you.
So that is the end of today's afternoon session and the last session of this room for the delegates in minds. I'd like to thank the presenters, Ada and Merlin. Ada told us about octopus skin patterns and behaviours were found to be linking to several factors, including shaping the hunting and the progression of collective hunting between octopus and fish. That was an aggressive behaviour in the group, proven individual movement and species composition. But the benefits for the fish were immediately obvious, wasn't always obvious what the benefits for the octopus were. And then Merlin went over to the Dutch Sea and examined habitat use and foraging behaviour in Dunlins. The results show that irrespective of bit length, Dunlins forage in locations with high abundance of polychaete and later seasonal selection for a particular gastropod. New knowledge of Dunlin and Sea may help us predict potential effects of sea level rise and available habitat. And there may be concerns about reducing